Good morning. Good to see you. I said morning, not morning, because I'm thinking about Garth Brooks right now. So that's why I said morning. Um, that's a funny way to start a sermon, I think, isn't it? Anyway, I got your attention. I was thinking about Garth Brooks this week, not really about Garth Brooks. I was thinking about one of his songs, and not really the whole song, just a part of the song. As I was reading this gospel, one of the first things I thought of when I was reading about the rough seas that the disciples are finding themselves in, today I heard Garth singing about there's bound to be rough waters. I don't remember the song. I can't remember what song it is, and I didn't bother to look it up. I just heard him singing, there's bound to be rough waters. And I found myself saying, amen. There's bound to be rough waters. And I think that in that short phrase, or statement, it sort of captures a truth about life, the way this gospel lesson does this morning. When we see these disciples this morning on the Sea of Galilee, in that boat, struggling with the rough waters, we know immediately this story's not just about them in that moment. It's about all of us. Life can be really tough. Life is, there's a lot of days when we feel like we are struggling against those rough, ferocious waters of life. And so I was really drawn to this gospel this week, I think in a way that was really really meaningful to me to get in touch with what God was communicating, I think, to us through this text. First, just acknowledging with us that being a human being is not always easy. In fact, being a human being is tough. Tough work. Not easy. It's not easy to love. Not easy to love. It's difficult, complicated. Sometimes it gets really heavy. It's not easy to be in a relationship with others, with other folks that we share life with. A lot of days it's good, but there are, as you and I know, there are other days where being in this place of love with another can become heavy and difficult. I know in my own relationships, but I know because I spend time with you during the week, I talk with you about your relationships, and I know that at times it's like we are trying to navigate across rough waters, challenging seas, storms of life. It's not just relationships. It can also be health issues or job issues or just all kinds of issues. Being human is a tough job. It's not easy. It can be very difficult to be a human being. The really wonderful news this morning, the really great news in this gospel lesson is as we watch Jesus move out across that Sea of Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee, toward that boat, we're reminded that regardless, whatever it is that we're struggling with, it doesn't matter what it is. This text also reminds us that we're not alone in the struggle. We are not alone in that struggle for life. Jesus moves out across those waters, and he catches up with his friends in that boat, and that boat is being tossed to and fro, just like we are sometimes in life. And Jesus says to us, it's me, it is I. Don't be afraid. Please don't be afraid. You're not alone in this. That's really good news, isn't it? It feels good to us as people of faith to be reminded this morning that God understands that we struggle with life, that life can be a struggle. But he also assures us today that we are not alone in that struggle. God longs to help us to stay above the waters, those rough and ferocious waters of life. So what I heard the disciples say as Jesus is moving toward them on the sea, I realized there's something in what they say that's very telling. You see, they don't recognize him. As he's moving toward them, as they are struggling in their life, in their call, in their ministry, as we are in different ways struggling with life, as Jesus is moving toward us, we're like those disciples who say, who is that? It's a ghost. No, it's like some phantom on the water. And all that means in the moment, I think, is that they don't really see him for who he is. We don't really see him for who he is and what his life could mean to us. That's my great frustration as a priest, is I think that we really don't see him for who he is and what his life could mean to us and for us as we struggle, as we wrestle with life, as we wrestle with those churning waters. And I think that's part of what this new year, maybe in formation, is all about. Hopefully more of us will commit to not just flirting with the church from time to time, but will really make a commitment to worship and formation in a way that will allow me to move deeper into the story of his life, into his life literally, so that that life of love and grace and peace and hope can begin to inform my struggle. Really help me with my struggle as I see him reaching out to me personally, reaching out and saying, don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. I'm here with you. You know, this isn't the first time that God struggled with rough seas. I mean, if you go back to early in Genesis, in one of those creation stories, God struggled, even as God was trying to create all that is in that creation story. God was, the rough waters, those destructive seas were standing in opposition to what God was trying to do. Those rough waters have always been there, even for God. God understands our struggle. And if God didn't get it before Jesus, God certainly got it in the life of Jesus as he watched his son struggle so desperately with life, trying desperately to stay true to himself, to stay true to his purpose for being. And yet at every turn, it seemed like life and the world was pushing back against him, threatening him. It's why he goes off in prayer this morning. Before he catches up with his disciples, he goes off to be in prayer, to be in the presence of his Father, because he too needs that. Jesus too needs to feel the presence of his Father in his life. His Father in prayer would encourage him and reassure him and help him to stay the course. Be true to who you are, Jesus. Don't compromise on who you are. It's part of what it means. It's part of what it means to stay above the waters, those waters that distract and destroy and threaten to suck us down. Stay focused on my face, Jesus, my Son. Stay focused on my face, my love, our word together. I realized as I was thinking about these things, something really important that we all need to be reminded of, and that is that God doesn't create the storms. I hear that all the time out there in the world, and even around the church. People will ask a question like, well, why is God doing this to us? Or why is this happening in my life? Why would God allow me to be in this place? And this text reminded me that this is not a God who creates the storms. This is an unusual God who goes ahead of us into the storms of life, who entered into the darkness most extraordinarily in the life of his Son, into the darkness of our pain and suffering, even entered into death itself for my sake and yours. This isn't a God who creates the storms. This is a God who promises to be with us in the midst of the storm. Take my hand. You're not alone in this. I know what it feels like. I've been there with my son. I've been there before. I've been there many times with my prophets. I've been there with my son. I've been there with many of you. I'm here with you in this place. And so, one of the things that I want you to take home with you today is an understanding that our faith experience, our faith does not shield us from the storms of life. Our faith does not guarantee that we aren't going to have trouble in our relationships, or that we are not going to become sick in some way, diseased in some way, that we aren't going to struggle with life in any number of ways. Our faith does not shield us from the storms, the challenges of life. Our faith assures us that we're not alone in them, and that we have a God who's already gone before us into those places of darkness, and who is waiting for us there to help us to negotiate the storms and even to overcome them. How wonderful it was for me, this is just in the past week, to have so many of you come in and talk with me and share stories about people in your lives that really moved you, and people who their faith informed your faith. And I heard such wonderful stories. A wife who came in, her husband died in the past year, and she was telling me things about him that I did not know, which is not surprising. I don't know everything about all of you. That's probably a good thing. It's a real good thing you don't know everything about me. That's a real good thing. But she was telling me some things I didn't know about him, and I did not know that his mother died just after childbirth. I didn't know that his father had deserted the children 6 months later. I didn't know that about his early life, that he was raised in different homes along the way. And I found it, as I was listening to her talk about that, I found it so hard to believe. And I said, because, gosh, he is so faithful. He was always so full of joy. He made such an impression on my life and ministry. And she said he found in God what he could not always find in the people around him. He found someone he could count on. And that informed his life and his living, you see. He still believed in the people around him for it. He didn't give up on people. In fact, his relationship with God helped him to stay in a place of continuing to give people a chance. He kept trying to trust over the years. And finally, he got to a place to where he was at home within himself and at peace with his early life. And then another person came in, and she came in to talk about something else. We ended up talking about her mother-in-law, who died a horrible death because she had diabetes, and she was very, very sick, and she was dealing with all kinds of issues and pain and the last couple of years of her life. And she said, Rick, as much as I remember that, she said, what I really remember is how she kept singing God's praise. She said, she said, you just can't imagine. At times I just thought it was absurd. The way I would see her writhing in pain, and yet she would be in prayer talking to her Father in heaven. She would say to her daughter-in-law, honey, the only way I've been able to stay the course through this illness is with my God's help, his presence in this. Can't you see him? How many times he reached out and took her hand and said, look, I'm here. I'm still with you. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. That's the promise of our faith. It's why it's so important for you and for me to spend time in the life and the story of Jesus. Because the more we spend time in his story, the more we really recognize him. We see him for who he is and what his life can mean to my life and yours. He is the one who comes to us on those rough waters of life, Peter. He says to us, Peter, I don't care how many times you've denied me. I don't care how many times you've turned away from me. I don't care how many times you've failed me, Peter, and the other disciples, and all of you who are here this morning. I don't care about that. I love you. I am here with you. I am for you. And if you're in a place of darkness and you don't see me, it's because you aren't looking very hard. I've already gone before you into the darkness. If you feel like you're sinking this morning, you need to reach out your hand and let me grab hold of it, because I have the power, even in your weakness, I have the power to lift you up out of that place of desperation and hopelessness and despair. That's the gift of faith. Faith doesn't shield us from bad things. Our faith is what gives us the stuff to overcome, to negotiate and overcome, and to witness to a love, that's greater than any pain in this life. Amen.